Ladies and gentlemen, you are now listening to That's 3 Ref, a wrestling podcast.
Everybody, howdy, hi, hey yo, this is Jesse Whitedeer, and you are listening to another installment of That's 3 Ref, a wrestling podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. It's raining over here wherever we're at that you cannot know. But yeah, thanks for joining us on this very rainy day over here on the other side of this microphone. I'm, of course, Jesse Whitedeer, your friendly neighborhood cosplaying goof. I am joined by the Bagman, Cody Bags. Bags with a Z. You know he's cool. You know the whole bit. And of course, we have the Fragmented Luchador, the immortal Fragmented Luchador, I should say. Chris Lawson, everybody. Thanks, guys, for stopping in. It's always great to hang out with you guys. Of course, your favorite Oklahomie. Why would you, want otherwise? You don't want another Oklahomie. You only need one in your life. Ian Cooper is unfortunately sick today, so he's sitting this one out. But yeah, here we are, and we're covering Starrcade 83, A Flair for the Gold. Pretty cool stuff here. So we were doing 1994, went 11 years back in time. Cody, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk about Starrcade. This is one I've been looking forward to. This is one of my favorite eras of professional wrestling. So I've been pretty excited to get to this one.
But yeah, it was real nice actually being able to revisit these as an adult, this era, because this wasn't technically WWE at the time. It was NWA. So it was real nice to go back and see a lot of those older wrestlers or that era of wrestling to see where it all started, basically,
Yeah. I mean, for the territory wrestling and everything. And it was really cool before, everything was bought up by that evil man, Vinnie Mac. But before we dive into it, guys, we did not get any listener mail for this week. But if you have a question, concern, a comment, or you just want to talk to somebody, you can submit all of your questions about the week's subject or just in general. You can send those questions to That's 3Ref on Instagram and Facebook. That's 3Ref at gmail.com if you want to shoot us an email. Or, of course, you can always comment on the post below. And, just say howdy, hey, if you want. Or say whatever you want. Or ask a question. Who knows? Also, this week's pet of the week is your friend and mine, Rolo, who is Chris's roommate's dog. So the anonymous roommate, shouts out to you. Your dog Rolo is a pet of the week. So shout outs to Rolo and shout outs to Chris's roommate. But yeah, here we are. Pretty exciting. Guys, what's interesting about this era of wrestling is I very much enjoy the heavy metal, if you will. So it's kind of crazy to think that you had hair metal. You had Guns N' Roses, Poison, Whitesnake, all those hair metal bands around this era. While at the same time NWA was running shows. So it kind of sets the scene. It sets the picture for all of this. So pretty cool stuff, though, if you ask me. I was talking to a coworker, a younger coworker, earlier, and they were talking about how they're going to go see Disturbed. Not Disturbed. It is Disturbed, yeah. So they're going to go see Disturbed in January, in Oklahoma City, and they were really excited about the show, and they said, yeah, my parent. I remember growing up listening to this music, and my parents really like this music. So I'm going to go with them. And I distinctly remember Disturbed as I was growing up. So it's weird to think that people younger than me are treating that music like Disturbed or bands of that ilk with nostalgia. You know, it's considered old metal, which is kind of interesting. I mean, what do you guys think? You know, I mean, have you had a time recently where you've recognized your age?
For me, to be honest, like it is very like almost, what do you say, humbling. Like it's maybe that's not the word that I'm looking for, but it kind of like hits me in the heart because I'm like, oh, really? Am I really getting that old? Dang, I'm only 34. Yeah. But to think that the music that I grew up on as like a teenager coming into into my like early 20s just is now considered more what do you call it? Dad rock.
I think the kids call it butt rock.
That's another one too, and I'm like, either way, it's just like it just hits you like, and not in a good way, and you're like, oh my god, why?
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's kind of you know, like Free Will and Bob Dylan would say, the times are a changing, which that might be an old man reference too to Bob Dylan. But yeah, I don't know. Cody, you've had any moments like that in your life recently?
Pretty much every time that I hang out with my kids, I realize how old I'm getting. Also, anytime I hang out with you, my age really hits me. So there's that.
I don't know what that means, considering that like I'm 3 years older than you. So, but I guess that's a good thing. I don't know.
That 3-year gap feels shorter and shorter all the time, Jesse.
You know, what's funny is, like I mentioned, Cody and I went to the same high school. I remember when Cody was just a young lad, and he came into the cafeteria, and he was wearing a Hardy Boys chain. And I told this kid at the time, I said, "Hey man, the Hardy Boys suck." And Cody just brushed it off. Couldn't be bothered. I think he even threw up the Jeff Hardy hand signal or whatever he does.
Little did I know, 15 years later, the Hardy Boys would suck.
I think that's.
Hey now. Those are my dudes. Those are my boys.
I thought you were going to start singing. I thought you were going to start singing All Star there for a second. Hey now, you're an All Star. Get your game on.
I almost did, but I was like, listen. Those are my dudes. And I draw a lot of inspiration, not only like in wrestling wise, but like musically from Jeff Hardy. So
yeah. Hold on. So what you're saying is that you're legitimately a fan of Jeff Hardy's band.
I am. I love Peroxide Gym. They literally like they make some great music.
Okay. You know what? We're not going to continue this conversation. I want to maintain this friendship. So I'm not even we're just going to move on.
To each their own.
There you go. But you know what we're moving on to, guys, is Starrcade 83, A Flair for the Gold. It was named after the year it was presented, as well as a reference to the world champion challenger, Ric Flair. It was the annual event of its kind, the first annual event of its kind, excuse me. It was produced under the National Wrestling Alliance, NWA, by Jim Crockett Promotions. Pretty cool stuff. This event took place on November 24th, 1983, at the Greensboro Coliseum in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is historically one of the most prominent wrestling cities and states in the country. It was broadcast on closed-circuit television around the southern U.S. Commentary and hosting duties went to legendary wrestling announcers Bob Cadell, and Gordon Sully, with wrestler interviews being given by a very young and, one would say, dapper Tony Schiavone, and fan interviews were given by Barbara Clary. So, I mean, yeah, just that's one thing that I liked about, going back in time, is seeing a very fresh-faced Tony Schiavone. Just, I'm not sure how old he was on this pay-per-view, but he didn't even have his like signature voice. You know how Tony Schiavone has that signature voice. He didn't have that, so maybe he didn't get those superpowers just yet. But I don't know. It was cool though. But of course, attendance was presented at 15,447. So yeah, really cool stuff there. I mean, I think one thing that I liked was just the aesthetic. You had just, I think, 3 or 4 camera shots. I mean, it wasn't. I wouldn't say that it's stripped down, but it's presented in a way where it brings some prestige to wrestling. Where you didn't need the fancy entrances, you didn't need all the flair, pun intended, but you didn't need all the extracurricular activity. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and kick it over to your friend and mine, Cody Baggs, and he'll. This was actually Cody's choice for the week, so I'll let Cody handle those duties, and me and Chris will pop in when needed.
Okay, as you mentioned, Jesse, the opening match of the card was the Assassins, which would be Assassin number 1 and Assassin number 2, with Paul Jones versus Rufus R. Jones and Bugsy McGraw. This match went for 8 minutes and 6 seconds. There's not really much to say about the match, at least in my opinion. I'd be happy to hear anything that you guys caught, though, that I might have missed. But a couple points to make. The Assassins in this case would be Joseph Hamilton, who was the original assassin, and assassin number 2 was actually Hercules Hernandez, who I'm sure you guys would recognize later on in the WWF just as Hercules. So that was pretty cool, getting to see him here before he had gone to the WWF, before he had done too much significant work in wrestling. So we get an early look at him here. Besides that, I don't really think there's too much to say about it. It was a decent match, nothing special. 2 veterans and Bugsy McGraw and Rufus R. Jones against 1 veteran and 1 rookie. But again, it was okay. Nothing special. The Assassins do end up winning with a roll-up, kind of out of nowhere. Bit of a slow start to the night, but the fans were into it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it was okay for an opening match. I mean, maybe if you saw it live, and I guess like it's kind of when you've to kind of tack on to what Chris said earlier is I wasn't really made aware of this style of wrestling. My granny or my grandmother, my dad's mom, she was really big into wrestling. But she would watch like WCW with me and stuff like that. And she would never really let me watch Raw, especially during the Attitude Era. She was more of a WCW person. So we'd watch that together and stuff. And she would tell me about like old wrestlers and, like Strangler Lewis. And, so she would tell me about the original Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers, and, people that she remembered. But I do recall her mentioning Ric Flair and Harley Race, and I can't remember if she had watched this. She would have been, well, my dad and mom would have been, kind of young parents around this age, and it's interesting to look back and see the style of wrestling, see how like stripped down it was, and how it wasn't, people weren't, you weren't doing planches over the top rope, or you weren't doing anything too crazy. It was just, strict, most of the time, strict mat wrestling. You would brawl a little bit. I think Rufus, R. Jones was doing some dancing, I could assume. I wasn't really into that part that much. And this match itself was okay. It wasn't, like Cody said, it wasn't anything special. It was all right. I didn't hate it, nor did I love it.
For me, it was this. It was very like you were saying, like you mentioned a few times. This bare bone style of NWA was something that it was different coming into it. Coming into it, watching it for the first time in who knows how long. Because, like I said, if I watched this era of wrestling, I was a very young kid and I didn't even realize what it was or how well it was done or unwell it was done production wise. But when you're so used to like seeing today's wrestling and then going back and seeing this, you're like, where's the entrances? Why are they already in the ring? What's going on? But like for me, this match it was something else. I mean, it showed good tag team cohesion, but in the same sense it was very like seemed like it was just kind of like thrown in there for some reason because Rufus R. Jones, or aka the Freight Train at the time, he was a champion, and I can't remember exactly what championship it was, but it might have been the NWA Mid-Atlantic Championship. I can't remember exactly the title he was holding right there. And then like his tag partner Bugsy McGraw, their styles were so what do you call it, eccentric, I guess, because you had Bugsy who was looking like almost like a madman just in some of the ways he was throwing punches almost like haphazardly, and then you had Rufus who was just kind of like you said was dancing, and it was like, how does this tag team work? Whereas the Assassins, they're two very, they had similar dress, same mask, they had the look of a legit tag team, but it was like, okay, so what's the story here? That's something that I would have liked to have known coming in. I was like, why are these two teams going up against each other? But other than that, like the match was, I mean, it's the first match on the card. You can't really expect much out of it, but it was good for what it was, I guess, at the time. But, like I said, it was just seemed like it was just kind of thrown together.
Yeah, and but before we kick it over to Cody, I just wanted to note that the look, because when I was watching wrestling in the mid '90s and stuff, everybody was like super jacked. Rufus R. Jones and then Bugsy McGraw, they kind of had more of a everyman build. And this is not to be disparaging, but seeing them together, they kind of look like old drinking buddies. Like people's two dads got together and we're still wrestling. I mean, that's kind of, and I mean, I will note that it was whenever I think it was McGraw when he was handing out those elbows and he was making his comeback. Assassin 2 tagged Assassin 1, and Assassin 1 kind of came in and he just kind of walked into like an elbow, and I remember thinking like, oh, okay, well, and he just walked into the elbow, and then he haphazardly sold it, so maybe that was more of a reflection on Assassin 1, but again, it was all right.
So when this match wrapped up, we went backstage again to Bob Caudle and George Soley, which we do quite a bit throughout the night. Which here I would like to note, something Chris mentioned earlier made me think of this. This was the early days of closed circuit pay-per-view format. So this was all brand new. Like all these ideas were brand new, and you can really tell watching it that nobody there really knew exactly what they were doing. Not to say they weren't professional, but this was just a whole new concept. So you can really tell the way the sound works, the way the cameras work. These people were really getting used to an event like this, I think. At least one televised in this way. But we go back to those two for a minute. Then it cuts to Tony Schiavone. He's mentioning that we're going to hear from both Flair and Race tonight before their match takes place. One thing I did like, though, while he's talking, you can see Flair and Piper speaking to each other. And I like this. This is a nice touch, I thought, because these were two of the top baby faces, good guys, featured on this card. And so it makes sense that they would be backstage together. And so I kind of like the little touches like that. Makes it feel a little bit more real, makes it feel a little bit more genuine. But from there, we go to match number 2, is Kevin Sullivan and Mark Lewin with Gary Hart versus Scott McGee and Johnny Weaver. This match went for 6 minutes and 38 seconds. Let's see here. Again, it's, fairly standard stuff. I think there was a bit more to this match. I think there was quite a bit more to this match, honestly. I still wouldn't have considered it one of the best matches of the night, though, but I kind of enjoyed this one. I was kind of getting more into the match, more into the event here. This one had quite a bit of fast tags. Things were going a little bit quicker. A little bit more going on. I feel like the guys in this match, they kind of had a little bit more of the look that we expect from professional wrestlers nowadays than some of the guys in the previous match, aside from Hercules anyways. But what we have here at the end, while the ref is distracted, Sullivan, Lewin, and Hart triple team McGee for the win. So more or less, this came across as kind of an enhancement match for Gary Hart's guys, because this was a time in the NWA where they were really pushing Gary Hart as a manager. Another thing to note about this match is that Angelo Mosca comes in at the end after Hart's crew starts attacking Scott McGee and Johnny Weaver. And with a little bit of hindsight, I find this kind of funny. We'll get back to that in a minute. But Mosca comes out to help, and he gets beat down pretty bad in the process and even gets his arm sliced open, even though he's supposed to be coming out later in the night as a referee. So our second match here, and we have heels away, or the bad guys walking away a second time in a row. The baby faces end up leaving here pretty bloodied, including the one that comes out to help, who's not even in the match.
Let me get to my notes. Sorry. I like this match. This match was definitely a lot better than the first one. Like you had mentioned, a lot of the guys with Sullivan, Mark Lewin, Johnny Weaver, and then of course McGee, they had that, like you said, that more athletic build. And it was what you expect to see from professional wrestling if you're maybe a casual fan, if you're not, kind of that deep into it. It was presented in a way where it was a little bit more, like you said, faster pace. A lot of guys, were kind of quick tags. And I really enjoyed at the end where the heels got over on the good guys, and they bloodied up McGee, and I think they had a cool spike, so they, cut his head and stuff and really beat him down. And then you had Angelo Mosca come out, make the save. I remember always hearing about like Sonny Fargo and Mark Lewin. So it was really cool to actually see Mark Lewin in action here. One thing I wanted to note, though, is I don't know which one it was, but one of the announcers called Gary Hart Kevin Hart, and then he corrects himself. So pretty cool to see or to hear Kevin Hart getting a shout out back in 1983 in NWA. So that was cool. I want to note that Johnny Weaver reminded me of an old wooden Indian. So like an old wooden Indian outside of like a tobacco shop. He kind of had that face going on. So that was pretty cool. I also want to note that like Kevin Sullivan looked like he was going bald already. I don't know how old he was at this time, but he definitely had the bulk going on, but he had a little bit of the Hulk Hogan hairline. So that was That was pretty cool. The play-by-play in this, I think it was Gordon Sully. I can't remember, but whenever the faces or the good guys were getting beat up and bloody, he was saying these things like, "Oh my God, this is terrible," so on and so forth. But the cadence in his voice wasn't really. He didn't seem like, "Oh my God," It was more of a dry kind of tone, which, I don't know if that was. I'm not sure where that was or how that, I just thought it was funny to me. I mean, I enjoyed that. And then I also want to note when Angelo Mosca was carrying McGee out of the ring, he was carrying him like you would a child. Like he kind of had him around the waist, and he was carrying him out of the ring like you would like a toddler or something. So that was interesting. But as far as like the play-by-play and stuff, I really liked it. I liked how fast-paced it was. I liked the kind of hard-hitting style, and I like that Mark Lewin and Kevin Sullivan got a chance to be really just malicious bad guys there at the end.
Like you guys both had mentioned, it was the more style of wrestlers that we were used to, and I also kind of went back into the little interview section, I guess, and did some math on Tony Schiavone's age in this era, and he being that he's 65 now, he would have been about 40 in this era. So it was kind of like seeing him in the baby face look of a young Tony Schiavone was kind of cool. But going back into the match, it was just watching the very fast-paced, almost collar and elbow style of wrestling of this era. Like, it's just watching the whole what's the word I'm looking for? Watching it, it was nice. It was fast-paced. It was good to see that more of a cohesion when it comes to the tag team partners, whereas in the previous match it was very like I said, haphazard and very kind of almost like I said, thrown together. But this match it seemed more very much planned out, and then when you get into the part where the bad guys win and they have that little altercation and start just taking Gary Hart takes his little thing out of his boot there after getting knocked down by McGee. You see them really go to town with that thing and just just use every bit of freaking ounce of fucking ilk they have, or not ilk, every bit of hatred they have towards these two guys to really do some damage. And then you guys had mentioned the announcers, like, we're used to more like that Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, like over eccentric color commentators, whereas these guys were kind of monotone and dry, and that's what kind of threw it off for the commentating. But I mean, given the era, that's kind of like what you just kind of had to have. You didn't really have people like Jim Ross or Vince McMahon or Tony Schiavone or even Mike Tenay and those kind of like good commentators of today. So, but yeah, for this match, it was if I had to give it a rating out of 5, I'd probably give it about a 3.5.
Yeah, and to correct you on a fact there, Chris, Tony Schiavone would have been about 26 around this time.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because he was born in 1957, and this was 1983. So it's about, depending on his birthday, about 25, 26.
Oh, okay. Well, then my math is definitely wrong.
I mean, he looked good.
I was
for
off
40,
by
though.
20 years. I was gonna say, yeah, no, he definitely does look very young. I was like, I was thinking early 20s, and then I did the math, and I was like, well, my math is wrong. That doesn't seem right. But then you said that, I was like, oh, okay, of course. But yeah,
I think you guys did a good job covering the match. You made some really good points. Not much more than I could add to that. So I definitely did. Like I said earlier, this match kind of started picking me up for the pay-per-view. I started getting into it a little bit more, which goes into the next match. We have Abdullah the Butcher versus Carlos Colon. First time I ever watched this Starrcade, I was very excited for this match. I went into it with a lot of expectations because I had heard of both of these guys and I had never watched a single match of theirs. And then I watched this match. This match was 4 minutes and 27 seconds. And not at all what I was expecting or hoping for. So at this point, these guys had been around for a little while. They were both extremely popular names, especially in Puerto Rico and Mexico. Actually, that's a point that they tried to sell this match on. Commentary, both Caudle and Soley pointed out multiple times that this match was banned in Puerto Rico, and that's why they were having it at Starrcade. Obviously, that was a way to kind of beef up the interest for the match because this match actually had no build-up in America. Apparently, it was only announced the week before Starrcade took place. And so this whole idea of the match being banned in Puerto Rico, that was to kind of build interest and hopefully get some attention on it that they were missing out due to having no build-up. But for anyone who did follow Puerto Rican wrestling or wrestling in Mexico, they would not have needed the build-up because this match would have been huge. But at the time, that was a completely different fan base. But the match itself, I'll get into that real quick. I'd pointed out already that it was only 4 minutes long, so it went quick. But I'm going to be honest with you, it felt like it was much longer than that to me. And I don't mean that in a good way. A little bit of back and forth. At one point, Abdullah, we see a weapon that he's hiding in his trunks. I believe it was his trademark fork that he liked. But at one point later on, Carlos Colon, he takes the weapon, the fork, out of Abby's trunks and he hits him with it. He busts him open pretty good. He continues hitting him. At one point, he's even biting his head where he's stabbed him with the fork. The match kind of comes to a conclusion whenever Colon gets the figure 4 on him. But Hugo Savinovich, the same that will eventually become a Spanish commentator, he shows up and hits Colon so that Abdullah can win. And that's about all that there was to it. A decent amount of blood for such a short match, but not a lot much else.
This match was not good. I remember reading about Abdullah the Butcher. So there used to be this store called, and Cody, you might remember this, but there used to be this store called Cash Savers. And
yes,
I remember, so I remember going to Cash Savers, and I remember that they had old wrestling magazines, like WWF magazine, WCW magazine, and then I remember they had like a magazine that would cover a lot of the Japanese guys, so a lot of guys from Japan and Puerto Rico and Mexico, really just a lot of places outside of the continental U.S. And I remember seeing Abdullah the Butcher in there, and I remember seeing him all bloody, and I remember seeing him in his trademark red trunks. I remember, hearing about it. And whenever you're a kid and you see Abdullah the Butcher, in your mind, it's a lot more, I wouldn't say cooler, but you kind of build it up a lot more in your mind. So kind of like you, I had not seen many Abdullah the Butcher matches. And then when I watched this, I was kind of reminded of the fact that that's probably a good reason because, yeah, it just wasn't good. The blood to me was unnecessary because, and this whole match just was just wasn't good. It just was unnecessary. Carlos Colon is a unsavory individual. And, of course, the father of Carlito. Other than that, just not good. I made a note that if Carlos Colon wanted to win this match, he should have brought in Jose Gonzalez to take out Abdullah the Butcher for him. But, yeah, I don't know. Just wasn't good.
Well, me being the hardcore fan that I am, I actually rather like the blood factor, and it was definitely on par with the Abdullah the Butcher character, because he was, he had his patented fork in his trunks just tucked away, and you would see very much times where he would get Carlos into like a headlock out of sight of the ref, and he would just go, like bam, just hit him with it one or two times. And then finally, once what Cody said, Carlos would get a hold of it, and then he would just go to town and just start hitting, waylaying him. And then when the ref would get in a way in view, he would kind of tuck it into his tights, kind of right there by his on his chest or whatever. And like as if like you see Abdullah the Butcher after he gets hit with that several times. He starts to don I was fixing to say patent, but he dons the proverbial crimson mask, and that's something that like the blood from this match is something that you see from this match on, because at the time, given the fact of the time it was, they don't have a way just to like, oh, we're going to change this ring or we're going to clean it up real quick, we're going to take off this one to have like an extra one. No, they just kept it. They left it there, and then you see the aftermath of that for matches to come. And for me it was kind of cool to see the father of Carlito, because I never got to see him, and it was like he was very, he had the look, but then again, like you said, he wasn't a very appealing person in life, but with some of his choices. But for what it was, and a little fun fact that I literally did not know, upon looking it up, Abdullah the Butcher would actually in his right hand, he would tape razor blades in his tape where he could blade himself. So yeah, it was just knowing those little facts is kind of cool, just to come back and see it.
I actually, I kind of like hearing another perspective on the match, because Jesse and I did not enjoy this match. Similar reasons, So it is interesting to hear from someone who did, and to hear and the reasons why and everything. So, let's see. Next, I want to backtrack just a second, and point out the backstage interview that took place right before this match. That was actually when we got to see Tony Schiavone in the heel locker room, speaking to Harley Race with the Briscoes and Greg Valentine there. So I just want to talk about this for just a second, because I thought it was a great image. We have our World Heavyweight Champion, we have the World Tag Team Champions, and the U.S. Champion, all together. They're the bad guys of the pay-per-view. They're the ones that have conspired against Ric Flair and his friends. And so I just really like that image of them in their locker room together, with Tony Schiavone interviewing Harley Race, but the others are there to have their say. Just a great shot. The content was pretty good too, but it's mostly that image that I really enjoyed. The biggest takeaway, though, was Harley Race talking about his match with Flair. His little comments about how he's learning Flair's shortcomings from the people that know Flair the most. Some ominous stuff ominous content right there. Now fast forward back to where we were. After the Abdullah the Butcher and Carlos Colon match, we cut back to Tony Schiavone again, this time with Angelo Mosca. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is when he comes back here and he's talking to Mosca, he asks him if he thinks he can still referee. Mosca gives this speech about how when he saw what they were doing to McGee and he saw him bleeding and he had to go out and help him because it made him think of his son. So he's giving this talk to the camera. He's really passionate about it. He's getting all worked up. And you see that he's bandaged. His cut, the slice on his arm is bandaged. But the more the camera pulls out, you see McGee in the chair next to him, and the man looks dead. Like, Mosca's sitting here. He's sitting here with a bandage around the one cut on his arm. And McGee is like leaned back in the chair, just covered in blood, completely covered. No one has checked on this man. No one has cleaned that blood off. They got Mosca's one little cut, but they have just left him there to die in this chair while Mosca gives this speech about how he reminds him of his son. And I'm like, what is happening? I know what you're trying to say, but what is happening? This man is dying.
Who the fuck cares about this main event? Get Dan McGee and a doctor, because he's like, no, he's. I know exactly. I was thinking the exact same thing, because he's just like profusely bleeding in this chair, and no one's even bothered to clean him up. And then they want to talk to Angelo Mosca about what his thoughts on the main event and stuff. And I'm just like, okay, we can't afford a medical staff or something on this event. I don't know, kind of pretty funny, but yeah. More to your point,
I get someone's idea in there was, this is a great image. We want to show the carnage that can happen at Starrcade. Like, my brain gets what they were going for, but I'm like, that match happened a while ago, and if you're going to shoot this, maybe do it earlier, or at least don't bandage Mosca's arm, like, to prove that there was a doctor there helping him, the guy with the scratch, but the guy that's over here, like, bleeding out of his head, yeah, just leave him there. He'll be all right. About the questions they were asking Mosca, by the end of this, he does state that he supports Flair. He thinks Flair is going to win. We go back to Barbara Clary, who is speaking to people in the crowd. This is the second or third time that they've gone to her, and she's out there getting the fans' thoughts on the night, asking predictions on who they think is going to win the main event. Obviously, just about everybody, if not everyone, is saying Ric Flair. So for anyone who hasn't caught on yet, we're really pushing Ric Flair. I mean, if a Flair for the gold didn't tell you, I think at this point you're catching on. We're really, really pushing Flair here. But moving on to the next match, we have Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater versus Mark Youngblood and Wahoo McDaniel. So this is an interesting match for the night. Partially because this is the first match of the night that is heavily entwined with the main event. So just a little bit of backstory here. The build-up to this match is centered around Wahoo McDaniel wanting to avenge Ric Flair. We'll go into a little bit of details later about this, but in the build-up to Starrcade, Harley Race put a bounty on Ric Flair's career. It was $250,000 if anybody could retire Ric Flair or injure him or just get him out. Like I said, we'll get into more detail in a minute on that. But our two guys here, Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater, they decided that they wanted to cash in on that bounty, and they inserted themselves into the Harley Race Ric Flair feud. Well, Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood are friends of Flair's. Flair and Wahoo went way back already at this point. So that played a big part into the buildup of this match. So, being one of the most important matches of the night so far, this match was given a 45-minute time limit. Also, being that this was a big match, we get one of our mentions of Dusty Rhodes here, that he's in the audience, that he's watching. This is also where we get the announcement that he's going to be challenging the winner of the title match, which they do mention a few times tonight, but we're kind of leaning into that here. The match starts out, I would say out of everyone in the match, Wahoo McDaniel is the veteran here. Dick Slater and Bob Orton Jr. had been around for a little while too, but Wahoo McDaniel was definitely that old guard at this point. But it's a pretty solid match in my opinion. There's some good back and forth. Everyone has a little bit of time to shine. I did note at this point, Gordon Soley, he mentions a suplex. I don't know if you guys caught that. Instead of a suplex, he calls it a suplex, which is a fun little thing. I'd never heard that term until a couple years ago. And apparently that's what it used to be called before it became known as a suplex. Just a little side note there. But back to the match. Wahoo and Youngblood, they take over on Slater. Orton comes in to take out Wahoo. He sneaks a tag to Slater. Slater and Orton take over. And then Orton suplexes Youngblood for the win. And the big part of this match, though, is actually what happens afterwards when both men come after Wahoo McDaniel and they injure his arm. That was the big afterbirth for this match. And it all goes back to Flair. He's a friend of Flair's, so they're wanting to take him out the way that they tried to take Flair out.
I really enjoyed this match. I think I had messaged you last night. I really enjoyed it. I thought that Wahoo McDaniel and Youngblood really did a great job, in this match. I liked the pairing of Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater. Again, I remember hearing about Dick Slater, through podcasts or different interviews, and a lot of guys would talk about Dick Slater and Bob Orton Jr. But it was cool to actually see these guys in action, and I really appreciated that style of wrestling, the kind of what we would know as kind of the kind of bruiser, brawling style of wrestling, and mixed in with the more technical stuff. But I really enjoyed that. I mean, I really liked that from both Orton and Slater. I liked, Mark Youngblood in this match, of course, and we would, see his brother Jay, a little bit later on in this pay-per-view, and of course, watching the veteran Wahoo McDaniel. Wahoo McDaniel, of course, was a legit Native American. He was a Chickasaw Choctaw. So I thought that was cool. Little side note that I found: Wahoo McDaniel's baseball coach was George H.W. Bush at one point. So, and it was cool to read that Wahoo McDaniel was trained by Dory Funk Jr. So that really showed in his veteran savvy, in this match. Wahoo McDaniel was a guy that I hadn't got to watch a lot of matches from, but I'm glad that we got it in here. An excellent pairing. I mean, I thought it was great. It wasn't my favorite match, but it was definitely a close second. I really enjoyed this, and I think it's always great to see Dusty Rhodes, in the crowd. Who can forget the legendary Dusty Rhodes? So always great seeing him. I did like that the mic cut out at one point, so it's kind of like the announcer is trying to do his thing, and then the mic cuts out, and then so that was kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, great match. I mean, not much I can really say other than I really enjoyed it. I mean, I liked the kind of grittiness and and toughness of Wahoo McDaniel in this match. I like how he was, his selling, and I like that Orton and Slater were able to double team him, beat him up. Now we're starting to tie everything in to this overall arcing story.
So for me, it was really cool seeing this match because you got to see Daddy Orton, or Cowboy Bob Orton, the dad of our one of my favorite wrestlers, Randy Orton. So it's cool to see him, and like literally, there's I think you had mentioned this before, Cody. During the week before. When I was watching it, you said that there's a shot where he literally, all you can see is Randy. And that's literally, as soon as it hit that shot, I knew exactly what you were talking about. I was like, okay. But it was really cool because it was a way to showcase some nice, like you said, Jesse, it was some nice bruiser brawler style of wrestling where you got to see more of that grit and, toughness of these four men. One thing I did like was how the heel team of Bob Orton and his name literally left my brain, but Gordon, I'm assuming, but
Slater, Dick Slater.
Yeah, Dick Slater. My bad. But yeah, it was real nice to see them two team up and pull. Ultimately they end up getting the win, yes, but it was real cool to see, like, even after the win, how Wahoo was like, you know what, I'm not done. I'm still ready to fight. I want to go. He's showing his veteran style of like, I'm ready. Let's go. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing. I'm gonna fight you no matter what. And that was one thing I loved about Wahoo McDaniel. Even like, and they bill him from Oklahoma City, and I totally forgot that he was he in college he played for Oklahoma, the University of Oklahoma. So it was just kind of cool to see someone of his prestige, not only in wrestling but in football, to team up with the younger guy. And have such good chemistry with him. It was almost like a veteran and student kind of teaming up together to go up against these two massive heels at the time, as they were teamed up, as they were aligned themselves with Harley Race, who we find out later, or like you guys had mentioned, had capitalized on the bounty that Harley Race had put on Ric Flair to try to take him out. As we see here in this pay-per-view later on, it didn't really work. So yeah, I really loved this match. It was, like I said, it was awesome. It definitely isn't my favorite, like you said, Jesse, but it definitely will always be something that I may even come back and watch more times over just to see this match, because it was a very nice addition to finally kind of pick it up for me. And one thing I did notice is this pay-per-view in general was very tag team. Like, there was a lot of tag team matches. Like, whereas today you only see like maybe 1-2 tops, where this one had 3 or like 3 to 4, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it was just it had 4 total, because later on we see Mark's brother Jay and Ricky tag team against the Briscoes. So it's real nice to see those guys. To see that they evened out the card with not only singles, but they evened it out due to singles and tag team styles.
That's a really good point, Chris. Because we're so used to the Vince McMahon mentality when it comes to tag teams nowadays, that sometimes it's easy to forget that there have been times in wrestling history where tag teams were prominent, or tag team matches were. So it is really interesting to watch a product that is not only that's not only not WWE, but it predates Vince McMahon and his empire of wrestling. To see like that there were tag teams, there were a lot of tag team matches on these cards, and they weren't random, they weren't nonsense. They put a lot of thought and build up into the matches and into the relationships between the teams and everything, which is quite a bit different than what we got used to in the Vince McMahon era. All right, so following up on this match, we went backstage with Tony Schiavone, who was talking to Flair, Steamboat, and Jay Youngblood. Flair gave a good promo about his coming up match. Jay Youngblood talked up Flair, and then Steamboat closed out the promo. It was pretty good content. Then Tony ends up pitching it back out, and this is whenever we go to Barbara Clary talking to Dusty Rhodes, but we had the audio problems and we weren't able to hear what Dusty said. I really like the way that Gordon Soley saved it was to say, well, if you can read lips, you know what he said. There you go.
I thought Jay Youngblood, he sounded bored during this promo. I mean, I did, and I, so maybe it's like, and I don't want to keep like going back to that or to, kind of seem like I didn't enjoy it, because I enjoyed it. You could tell that the guys like with Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat, they definitely had the promo chops. Maybe just like the cadence. I'm not sure what it was, but I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just kind of Jay Youngblood just didn't seem really like into it, I guess, as far as voice inflection wise. But I mean, you see like the total opposite, where what little bit we did get to hear from Dusty Rhodes, and of course we get to hear that promo again later on. But you could see just how good Dusty Rhodes was, like in this era and any era really, with his promo, and what little bit you got to hear. And like I said, you get to hear the rest of it, or you get to hear it again rather later on. But it was just the comparison was so jarring, and it's always great seeing Dusty. I mean, I can't overstate that. Always great seeing him back then, and he's not with us now. May he rest in peace. But it's always cool to take a trip back and watch all of this. It's great content.
Yeah, for me, like I was always a huge fan of Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, the working man's wrestler. He definitely cared about. He didn't care about like the high class, high anything. He was all about just making sure that everyone got over. That's one thing I loved about Dusty Rhodes. And then it was nice to hear that conviction from him. Even when you couldn't hear him, you could tell that he was still putting every bit of ounce of what he had into that promo, or what he was trying to say. And then, like you said, Jay, he just seemed disconnected. He was just trying to think about other things. He was like trying to keep focused, but then again, he the way he was like, he would look up and it was almost like he was trying to think of something to say, but the words were just coming out and he wasn't trying to go. But you had a great promo from Rick, like always. That was one thing that Rick kind of rivaled Dusty Rhodes in was in promo work. And then you had Ricky who kind of closed it out and kind of saved it after the kind of blundering kind of way that Jay kind of went about his the way he was trying to say. So yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next match, we have Charlie Brown versus Kabuki. This one had a 60-minute time limit, and it is mask versus title, with Charlie Brown putting his mask on the line against Kabuki's TV title. All right, so this is one that I kind of had some fun with. We'll talk about the match quality in a minute. But a little bit of history here. For anyone who knows wrestling from this era, and I know everyone on this podcast knows exactly who this is, but Charlie Brown is actually, surprise, surprise, Jimmy Valiant, for those of you who didn't know. So a little bit of history here real quick that led into this match. Jimmy Valiant, he was burned by a fireball thrown by Gary Hart during a feud. So Valiant then challenged Hart to a loser leaves town match, but Hart works Kabuki into the angle. So in late August of 1983, Valiant would face and lose to Kabuki in a loser leaves town match due to interference by the Briscoes. Valiant would then later return in a mask as Charlie Brown. That led to the booking of this match with the added stipulation that if Valiant is unmasked, he will be suspended for life. So that's what led us to this match. And I'm going to say that to kind of match my feelings with the earlier match of Abdullah versus Carlos Colon, I was not a fan. I was pretty disappointed. If I haven't mentioned already, this match actually went 13 minutes and 13 seconds, which is quite a bit longer than that other match. But I really don't feel like it needed to. Not to say that Charlie Brown, not to say that Charlie Brown didn't look good for his age at the time, and that there wasn't some good spots in here. But overall, I just wasn't impressed. But what I will say, throughout the match, the fans were all over Charlie Brown. It's unreal just how over he was as a wrestler and as a personality. By the end, Valiant will end up winning with an elbow drop, and the crowd goes wild. So a note real quick, though. I noticed that this was actually the first babyface win of the night. And we're in match number 5. Or, well, I should say this is the first time that the babyfaces walk away very happy, at the very least. Another note to make, too, though. Valiant's win here, he won the title. This was the first closed circuit pay-per-view title change in history.
I think that when I messaged you last night about this match looks like 2 created characters fighting each other. Like on WWE 2K, it looks like 2 people. If you created 2 random created characters and you threw them in like a match against each other, that kind of would be this match. Now, I say that because like I think both guys separate are great. You know, of course, the handsome Jimmy Valiant, story career there, and I think he's great. You know, and what's really interesting about him is in addition to his long career, he also wrestled a match at like 80 years old. So I think that was like a year or 2 ago. So that was, he's still around, and even at the young age of 80, he's out there, working and still in love with professional wrestling. So, excuse me there. But yeah, so I think Jimmy Valiant's great. You know, of course, the great Kabuki is great. This match was not great. This match just, I'll say that it wasn't as bad as the Carlos Colon Abdullah the Butcher match for me, but it was a close second. I mean, it was, I don't know. I mean, and it was interesting because the great Kabuki had worked with, Dusty Rhodes, who we've mentioned several times, back in I think a year or so prior. So it's, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, I just feel like each guy you could have done something different with, and I know that there was a storyline. I know that, Gary Hart and Jimmy Valiant, had their beef, and and of course you get the great Kabuki in here. But I just felt like each guy's talents could have been, used for better opportunities. And I mean that's about it. I mean, I don't really have any other thoughts, other than what Cody had mentioned is that this match was super over with the fans. The fans were really into it. The fans were into the Charlie Brown character, from and then they I think it's Gordon Soley who keeps making the reference from out of town, Charlie Brown, and but it just it was okay. I mean, I didn't really. I just wish that each guy had something different to do.
I totally forgot that Charlie Brown was even a thing. I was like, who in the heck is this weird dancing around dude? And I was like, he's got this big old long beard and this long flowing locks coming out of this mask. Who in the heck is this? And then when I looked it up after watching this match, I was like, that's freaking Mr. Valiant himself. I'm like, holy shit. I totally forgot about Charlie Brown from out of town. And I was like, man, the way that he just kind of like presented himself, it was just like, okay. Now I understand, it kind of reminds me of the whole, Hulk Hogan getting fired and then coming back as Mr. USA or, whatever. Mr. America, that's what it was. But still, it's just funny to see. They kind of maybe that's where Hulk Hogan had got the idea to don a mask and come back as some other character was from, Mr. Jimmy Valiant himself. But it was kind of cool to see this match because it was like you got Kabuki, the guy who's very ominous and menacing, and then you have Charlie Brown, who's very eccentric and like out there and just all around, just kind of like there was sometimes he was selling, he was just kind of shaking around. I'm like, what is wrong with you? And then Kabuki would just shut him down with just throwing the mandible claw on his head and just keeping him there while all the while, guess who's still shaking around and doing his thing? Charlie Brown, just being the crazy self he is. But this match was definitely it kind of like upped the factor for me, and then we got to see, our boy from who created the massive chaos that happened in the ring with the blood, Mr. Gary Hart, here managing Kabuki. It was it's just you kind of wondered, is he going to try to pull something else? But he ended up just kind of like being there, doing his legit manager thing. Without having to do any kind of dirty tactics, But it seemed a very almost one-sided match where Kabuki was kind of taking control, but then all of a sudden here comes Charlie Brown and kind of just takes it over and wins the title. So it was, like I said, it was. I swear. Charlie Brown, he just got me. Anytime he would just try to amp himself up, it's bobbing his head, shaking his arms. I'm like, bro, calm down. You don't got to go that crazy with it. But that's about all I have for this match. Like I said, it was a very lighthearted match for me. Seeing Charlie Brown, not lighthearted, but just seeing Charlie Brown just kind of be his ego, like it just. Eccentric self, just watching him do his thing while Kabuki's sitting here trying to be his ominous and menacing self. But I if it was me and I was in Kabuki's things, I would be like, the reason why I'd have my hair over my face is because I'd be trying to hide a smile or trying to keep from laughing.
I will say that I didn't find the match to be very high quality. It was entertaining in its own way. Jimmy Valiant was always entertaining, at the very least. All right. After this match, we would go backstage to Bob Caudle and Gordon Soley again. More of the same, talking up Harley Race, plugging Roddy Piper's match. A pitch to Shivani with Race, Orton, and Dick Slater. So we get some more of the heels backstage. And then we go back to Barbara Clary with Dusty Rhodes. where we hear him officially make the challenge for the title match against whoever wins, which, with a little hindsight, we know that sets up some classic matches and a classic feud. And then we go into the next match. The next match is Roddy Piper versus Greg Valentine, and it is a dog collar match. The match itself actually went on for 16 minutes and 6 seconds. So that was the longest match of the night up to this point. A little bit of build up here, though, and a little bit of backstory. So what kind of kicked this off is, at one point, Greg Valentine had severely injured Piper's ear to take the U.S. title from him. If I remember right, they tried to play it off that he had nearly ripped the ear off. The doctors would even say that Piper couldn't wrestle, but he made his vow to return, like any classic good guy would. He'll be back. When he came back, actually with Flair at his side as his friend, which is something I like. You know, your top good guys working together whenever they know they need to. But he shows up and he chokes Valentine out with a rope and ends up suspended. The suspension is soon lifted and Piper returns and he introduces the chain and makes the match challenge. So the rules of this match is that each man has a collar around their necks and the collars are connected by a long chain. The match is eventually made and approved by Jim Crockett himself and set for Starrcade. So, other than the Abdullah Carlos Colon match, this is the first match that we've had that is no disqualification. It's the first match we have with the stipulation. And so, also, I would mention that I noticed they made a point of saying that there was no time limit for this match, which I thought was interesting. But anyways, so these guys, they start out. I love that when they first start out, they kind of have their test of strength, pulling on the chain with their necks, seeing who's going to give ground first. And immediately, right away, they start using some interesting, or they start using the chain in some interesting ways. Because this is not the first collar match that had ever happened, but it's reaching new audiences that have never seen a collar match. So they're using the chain in some fairly simple but interesting ways. Like whenever they come close to each other, they kind of fight over who gets the slack. Different points in the match, they each use the slack of the chain to beat each other. That plays a big role in the end, actually. But there's some good back and forth. And we've had some brutal matches earlier in the night. We've seen some brutal things happen, whether it was Abdullah and Colon or whether it was what happened to Wahoo McDaniel. We've seen some brutal stuff. But there was something about this match that I felt like not just the blood, but the brutality was used in a smart way. Not to say some of what happened earlier in the night wasn't too, but both of these guys knew exactly what they were doing. Whether they were in the ring, whether they were out the ring, whether they were using the chain to beat each other with, or at one point we see Piper wrap the chain around Valentine's face and Valentine vice versa. I think Valentine wraps the chain around Piper's eyes and his throat. Another thing I had seen that I don't actually think I've seen since, both men were inside the ring, but Piper was still able to wrap the chain around the ring post on the outside of the ring and use that as leverage on Valentine. But in the end, Piper has a flurry with the chain, using the slack to beat Valentine. And just as simple as that, he beats him, goes for the pin, gets it. Of course, there is some afterbirth, which I know I've said that a couple times. For those of you who don't know, that's just a way to express that there was action after the match. If anybody out there has never heard that term in regards to wrestling. But anyways, there was some afterbirth after the match with some more fighting. But to comment on that ending, I just really like how simple it was. Not to complain about modern wrestling, because there are times where I like this, but you would often, nowadays, you would expect to see something like that, and then the wrestler would use their finisher. You know what I mean? Like, they would use the weapon, they would do something, they would incorporate the weapon into their finisher, or they would use it in some like insane way and then use their finisher. But in this one, it's just as simple as Piper beats the hell out of Valentine with a chain for a second, and then he gets the pin. And there's just something about that that makes it feel more real, because in real life, I feel like that would happen. You beat somebody with a metal chain enough, they're probably going to stay down. So if you guys can't tell, I really got into this match. I was really excited watching this match. It's not the first one I liked of the night, but it was probably my favorite up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say too much other, that already been said by you so eloquently. But yeah, I mean, I really liked it. I liked the realness of it, or and it wasn't it made it more real. And I think like by adding that realistic tint to it, it made it more important. It became it wasn't really like a match so much as it became like a struggle of like survival, like who could out tough who, and who could get the advantage, who could win the match by like inches, who could get that little bit of momentum, and you would see it shift differently, like you said, where Valentine was able to hit Piper in the eyes with it. Piper was able to use the chain to whip Valentine. Valentine was able to whip Piper, and then of course with the ending, you see Piper when he wraps Greg Valentine's legs with it. And, I thought it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed the opening bell. It was interesting to hear. I think it was one of the guys who said something to the effect of like pit bulls, like two collars you would put on big pit bulls. So I always thought that was like a more recent thing, like like in the recent as in mid to late 90s with people not I'm trying to think of what the word would be, but people associating pit bulls with being like tough or being like quote unquote like bad dogs. So I didn't know that it was actually earlier with the with 1983 because I forgot who says it, but they said like this is two collars you would put on like two big pit bulls, kind of insinuating that like a pit bull is a big tough dog, that needs to be held by a chain. And yeah, I mean, so that was interesting to hear. The match itself was great. I mean, I could see in this match, I could see why the violence was needed. Like it served a purpose, you know what I mean? Whereas in the Cologne Abdullah the Butcher match, it was just kind of, the fork was used because it could be used, but the chain was brought in and it was a useful tool for both wrestlers. So, and of course the ending, I liked how, the fans got into it all match, but especially the ending after the match when, Valentine attacked, Piper, and how you just hear one of the fans just screaming, just, hey, get off of him, leave him alone, that type of stuff. And I liked all of it.
So for me, this match really kind of like I said, it was the one that got me most invested into this pay-per-view because like I loved Roddy Piper. He was one of my all-time. He's probably one of my all-time favorites right up there with Dusty Rhodes and right up there with Ric Flair. Especially in this era, Roddy his style was so aggressive, but he also incorporated some of that like old school, like almost collegiate wrestling style into his style. But in the way like where he's more plain wrestling style. He would later incorporate his patented kilt. It was nice to see him kind of literally just going like full on Mad Dog with it. He's the one who presented this match. So he was like, he knew what he was getting into going into it, especially with someone like Greg the Hammer Valentine. But you see, like Cody, you had mentioned that this indeed was not the first ever dog collar match. This is technically the fourth. The first one was in Pacific Northwest or the Pacific. What was it? Trying to think of it now. The first ever time it was presented was actually in the PNW was what it was, and it was and then the matches to come after it were by like the Junkyard Dog. You had people who had done it before, but the one that really brought it into the whole the kind of brought this whole dog collar match into fruition was this match right here. It was the one that kind of just took this style of like almost brutal, fighting into like between two wrestlers that could not, get within like 20 feet of each other. They had to stay close. You couldn't just run away. You were tied to that person. You were made to where you had to fight no matter what, whether it was to keep that guy close to you or if it was to fight up close or to fight up close and be right there in your face, or to utilize that chain and maybe use it like Roddy did by tying it around the ring post to kind of choke your opponent out, to kind of take him out that way. But just seeing this match, it was just so just amazing to see even Roddy, like when after his ear gets like re-injured per se, and he's sitting there like he's at times he would sit there and just wipe at his ear, and just kind of like you could see his inner self just being like, seeing the blood and just going, just literally just going ham and cheese with it, as a weird term to say right there, but like that's what he was doing. He would see the blood and just, all of a sudden snap. He's like, I'm going for it. I'm going to take this guy out no matter what I have to do. If I got to beat him with my own hands, if I got to beat him with this chain, I will do whatever it is to win this match, and ultimately he does. So it's like, it's cool to see this all out brutal fight between two very prestigious wrestlers, two very loved wrestlers in the company. And just all out, like I said, I love the whole Hart. Like me being the hardcore fan that I am, it's just nice to see the two of them just all out battle and just go for broke. And I will say one more. It was the Pacific Northwest that was the first ever wrestling company to do a dog collar match. And that match was done by Johnny Boyd and Killer Brooks. And it ended with a double knockout, actually, for the both of them. Just to kind of give a little tidbit on the first ever dog collar match.
I don't think I actually knew that. So wrapping up this match, though, which, again, I think we all agree, great match. We go backstage again to the same people we have all night. Bob Caudle, Gordon Soley. Then we pitch to Tony Schiavone with Flair and Wahoo. And then again to Barbara Clary. So we haven't talked about everything that it's said in these segments, but I do mention them for a reason, because I think there was something. I don't know if I want to say special, but there was something special about how they would go back to them to plug the main event consistently. That's something I really liked about it. Every time we go back to Stoli and Caudle, they're always throwing something in. Sometimes they're doing a whole segment about the main event, or they're just making a little subtle comment. Tony Schiavone is going back and forth between the heel and the babyface locker rooms to get comments from Harley Race and the others, or from Flair and Wahoo and the others. And Barbara Clary is in the crowd. She's asking the fans what they think about the main event. And so it just gives this impression of the importance of the world title match. And I love that. It gives this impression of prestige that I think is lost to some fans nowadays. And I don't mean all. But there was just something about the emphasis that they put on it throughout the entire night leading up to the match. But we're not quite there yet. So our next match is actually the Briscoe brothers, the original Briscoe brothers, versus Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. This match is for the tag team titles, and it would end up going 12 minutes and 48 seconds with Angelo Mosca as the referee. A little brief history real quick, though. This is not the first time that these teams have faced off. In fact, they'd had a feud going on for several months. Kind of like some of the matches I mentioned earlier. There were several back and forth title exchanges between these teams, which I know there was a lot of complaining about that, because it kind of stunted the anticipation for this match, since they'd already faced each other several times and dropped the belts to each other several times. They tried to add a little bit of flair. No pun intended on that one. By having the Briscoes actually steal Jay Youngblood's ceremonial headdress. So there was that. They tried to do something there. I don't know. But then just a couple weeks before this match took place, Steamboat and Youngblood would actually lose the titles to the Briscoes. All right. So if you're watching this in a vacuum, you may not realize all of the history there that had kind of killed the anticipation for this match, and you might be able to enjoy it for itself. But at the same time, I also feel like these guys did a good enough job in the ring that even for the fans who had seen them going back and forth constantly for the past several months, you were able to really get into it. So being Steamboat, and, honestly, Jay Youngblood too, these guys are fast. They're quick in the ring. They got all the quick moves. They're so impressive. And we know what Ricky Steamboat ends up doing with his career. So it was great seeing both of these guys when they were fairly young, getting started out with a veteran tag team like the Briscoes. And at this point, honestly, these guys, the Briscoes, had both been world champions. So they're established names. They work so succinctly as a tag team. One of the best, if not the best team at the time. The win was a little lackluster for me, considering the rest of the match. But it was nice seeing Youngblood get the pin himself. I enjoyed that. But like previous matches, there was a little bit of afterbirth, a little bit of stuff going on afterwards. Youngblood is thrown out. The Briscoes try to double team, and they double team Moscow, and they try to figure four and splash Steamboat, but Moscow would come in and he would stop the splash, very awkwardly, but he does, giving Steamboat and Youngblood a chance to make a comeback, and they're able to celebrate in the ring.
I think, for me, I think that this was probably my favorite match of the night. And no disrespect to Harley Race or Ric Flair, I enjoyed that match too, but I really enjoyed the tag team action in this match, and they just worked so in syncly together. Like they were just one person. Just, they were extensions of each other. They worked great. I love this. It's really a shame what the WWF would do to Jerry Briscoe, later on after he went to the WWF, maybe some 10, 12 years later. But in this era, if you just watch this match in a vacuum, I think it's great. They did fantastic. Of course, Ricky Steamboat, the Dragon, is always fantastic, always a great wrestler. This match was just fantastic. I couldn't really, and of course with the addition of Young, I thought it was fantastic because it gave some legitimacy to the tag titles, because you had a tag team like the Briscoes coming in as the champions, and you've seen how well they work together. So if you're new to wrestling, or this was maybe your first time or whatever, just the presentation of the Briscoe brothers, of how well they worked together, how they were presented, it was legitimate, it was serious, and it really gave levity to the fact of how much of a great, or it gave levity to the fact of how big of a win it was when Steamboat and Youngblood did win the titles at the end. And the ending for me when the Briscoes had attacked Steamboat and Youngblood and Angelo got involved, that was okay. I think I noted like I wasn't really a big fan of that, but I thought the match beforehand was great. I liked the spot from Ricky Steamboat, which I think he's in an arm bar, and then he rolls and he pecks. I think it was Jerry. He pecks him up, and then he super. I thought that was great. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility, and I thought that Ricky Steamboat, that transition with Ricky Steamboat and Jerry Briscoe was a fantastic, transition. And the slam was great, and everyone involved in this match was great. And I think, again, it's a shame what they did to Jerry Briscoe after this, when he was one of Vince McMahon's stooges, during the Attitude Era. But it was cool. I wasn't a big fan of I think it's Angelo. I can't remember which Briscoe brother he catches when they jump from the top. They say that he catches them, and then he just kind of he falls over. So I don't know if that was intentional or what was supposed to happen. Wasn't really a big fan of that. Again, it was interesting, Cody, what you said about the Briscoe brothers stealing the headdress from Youngblood. Given that both the Briscoe brothers were inducted into the Chickasaw Hall of Fame later on in life. So it was interesting seeing two legitimate Native Americans taking the headdress from a guy who wasn't Native American.
Oh, I just said plot twist.
Oh, is Youngblood actually a Native American?
Oh no, I was just saying plot twist to the fact that he's not.
Oh yeah, but and I thought the belt design with the tag titles was fantastic. I thought it was a cool belt design. I liked everything about this match. No complaints from me here.
With what you two had said, this I really not sure if I had even much to add to it, other than the fact that this match, out of all the tag team matches, it was definitely the most you could tell that the crowd was really loving it. Like with the chemistry that between Jack and Jerry, and then you had Jay and Ricky, who were very much just just trying to fight for their lives because the Briscoe Bros were very heavy-handed and they were very controlling of this match, And then when you finally would get the pickup from Ricky when he would come out, and then Jay would come in, and then it would kind of die down because he would start getting beat up. Ricky was really the saving grace, I guess, of what this tag match for me, because we all know that Ricky became very much prestigious wrestler himself and very loved and sought after, whereas Jay kind of just faded off into obscurity. So no, it was a very much amazing match to see two wrestlers, not only of the collegiate side, but of the professional side that were the Briscoe Bros, just take control and very much try to beat down and take out their opponents to retain their titles, which, given the fact they didn't hear, but it was still nice to see the heel side of the two of them, because they were very much some of the best, one of the best tag teams of the era for me. And then you had Angelo, who was very one-sided in his reffing, of course, because the Briscoes would end up fighting with him, and he would kind of stop the other one, and he was not the greatest official of the night, but he was definitely, like I said, he was very one-sided. And, it was very much a face thing for him to do, to go against the bad guys and trying to be the official. But I honestly don't think he did that well. But, other than that, it was this match, like you said, Jesse, it probably was my absolute favorite, aside from the dog collar match between Roddy and Greg the Hammer Valentine. But it was a great match. There was nothing I could take away from this match other than the fact that Jay was really the one that was kind of the downfall of the team. Even though they still won, it was just kind of like he was the one that was kind of out of it for me. Like I wasn't really into it whenever he was in the ring, because he just kind of fell flat for me in this match.
Yeah. Well, and I will add on to what you said is the reason Jay Youngblood fell off is he actually died in 1985. So, I guess he fell off literally from life because he died. So,
well, you're right there. But I'm just saying, no one today even still talks about him. Even if he died still young in his career, it was just something of the factor of no one actually still talks about him to this day. But yeah.
No. I know what you're saying. No. But it's that was it. And I think the Briscoes actually would I think it was the year, and Cody could probably correct me on this, but it was the year after, I think in '84 is when the Briscoes sold their shares of Georgia Championship Wrestling, I think, to Vince McMahon, and that was around what's known as Black Saturday. That's 1984. So, very, very soon after this is when you've seen definitely a tonal shift in, in wrestling. With the Briscoes selling their share of the Georgia Championship Wrestling, which I believe that was in '84. But yeah, more to your point though, yeah, you hear a lot about the Briscoes and you hear a lot about Ricky Steamboat. Not so much Jay Youngblood, unfortunately. Now, and I will ask you guys this because I legitimately don't know. is there any relation between these Briscoes that we've seen and the Briscoes that would wrestle for TNA and on the independent circuit, the new incarnation of the Briscoes?
No.
Yeah, no, I don't think they are. They just kind of like assumed the role of the Briscoe name because I think their names are actually like their last names are like Pugh, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I didn't know, but yeah, I mean, but that is correct though, Cody. The during that national expansion in 1984, when the Briscoes sold their shares of Georgia Championship Wrestling, that did lead to Black Saturday, correct?
I believe so. That sounds like the right time. I don't want to say for sure off the top of my head, but I think you're right on that. I do think so.
Hell yeah, and I know that Angelo Mosca, he would stick around Jim Crockett, around this time, and I think his son Angelo Jr. If I'm not mistaken, either he or his father were the Mid-Atlantic champion a few more times before they went to what was it? Maple Leaf Wrestling, right? Yes, that sounds right.
Right.
Well, okay, great.
All right. So now we are ready for the main event. All right. And for the main event, we finally have the 7-time champion Harley Race putting his World Heavyweight Championship on the line against Ric Flair. And this is a cage match refereed by the former champ, Gene Kiniski. And a little bit of backstory here. Flair had actually been the champion before, but it was looked at as a pretty lackluster run. He didn't get the attention or the fan base that was expected. So Harley Race would end up beating Flair for the title in a controversial manner in June. And then Race would refuse to give Flair a rematch. But Flair would go on to call it the Summer of Flair, and he would vow to get his rematch. And this time it would be in Carolina. This is what led to Race putting out a $250,000 bounty in July of that year, which is what I had mentioned earlier. Orton and Slater would attack Flair in August, but they didn't get the job done. So the next month, they would attack him again during his rematch with Race, his first rematch. Due to this attack and these injuries, on October 1st, Flair would announce his retirement while Harley Race would obviously gloat. But it all turned out to be a feint because Flair came back with a baseball bat to take out Slater and Orton. So after all of this, the match was then announced, and Flair would get his wish. He would have the rematch, and it would be at Starrcade in North Carolina. By the time this match took place, Race would be considered one of the best champions in the NWA history. Like I mentioned, he was a 7-time champion. He had been on the top for a little over 10 years, as opposed to Flair's one title run, which was not what was expected. However, if you couldn't tell by everything building up this night, the stage was set for Flair. From the title of Flair for the Gold to everything I mentioned earlier with the NWA pushing Flair, with Barbara Clary going out into the crowd asking fans who's going to win. Everyone's saying Flair. All the times they're going backstage and they're talking to Ric Flair about facing Race for the title, or they're talking to Flair's friends, or they're talking to Harley Race about him facing Flair. Due to all of this buildup, he's been painted as the underdog that won't give up despite a bounty being on his head, despite being attacked by all these different people. He won't back down. And he's not scared of Harley Race. And this has lasted for about 6 months at this point, which is just enough time to really get the fans behind him. They don't drag it out too long, just enough to amp the fans up. And now that this event has been tailor-made for him, everything leaning in his favor, it's time for the match. And then when they announce the main event starting, even then they still push this idea of Ric Flair. Because, well, first of all, Chris, you had mentioned at one point when you were watching this that it was strange. It was weird watching a pay-per-view where there are no entrances. And I told you just wait till the end. So when Flair comes out, he has that classic, what's now a classic Flair theme song. He's got the music, he's got the robes, he gets a disco ball. The only person all night that not only gets an entrance, but gets music, gets the whole works. So he makes his big grand entrance, and then Harley Race comes out, and I love that he has a robe too, and he gets a little bit of a light show, but Harley Race doesn't even get music. So after all this buildup, all these months, everything that's been going on, and then everything that's happening during the pay-per-view, Flair's friends versus Race's friends, all the interviews, all the back and forth, we finally get it. Flair, Harley Race for the title. And to me, I will say this isn't one of my favorite matches of all time, and it's probably not even my favorite match of the night. But Piper versus Valentine was brutal. They were able to find that hardcore brutality and be smart about it. While the Briscoes versus Steamboat and Youngblood, that was like the epitome of technical wrestling at the time. This match had the right balance of both, I thought. They were able to use the cage as a weapon. Flair gets busted open fairly early on. Race is bleeding before the end. But there's still wrestling in there. They find that balance of using the cage, of trying to really hurt each other while still wrestling. And so I've never been the biggest fan of Race, and I think that kind of held my opinion down a little bit for this match, because to me, he's a little slow here, especially at this point in his career. He's kind of slow. He's getting a little old. You can tell. He retires not too long after this. So this wasn't like the previous match where everybody was in shape, everybody could physically go. But both of these guys knew what they were doing. They were ring psychologists. They were physically talented in their own ways. But what we get here, I made a note of a certain shot that we get of Flair's face covered in blood. It's a great image. And then immediately we get the figure four. Flair gets the figure four, Race reverses. Then Flair re-reverses it into the ropes, which I thought was really cool, really clever. Doesn't take long, though. Harley Race is able to get his patented headbutt from the second rope, something he'd been trying to do throughout the match. But Flair kicks out. And then in the end, Flair gets a crossbody from the top rope for the 3 count. Again, it's a fairly simple finish, but back then, those top rope moves, they were impactful. That was enough for the crowd. That was enough for the match. Flair gets the win. Harley Race passes the torch. Great moment. And we end the night now knowing that we're going to be getting Flair versus Dusty. And then with hindsight, we know just how iconic that becomes.
I like this match. Obviously, I had talked in length about the previous match, the tag with the tag team titles, but this match I really liked it. I liked what you said of that they used technical wrestling, but they also implemented the cage. And even the ref is kind of discouraging that. He's saying, hey, this is a wrestling match. We need to wrestle. So it was really interesting to see that, to see kind of the first, because normally if you watch a cage match, in present day, or, even a little bit earlier with the ruthless aggression era or attitude era, you're used to a cage match. We watched Bret versus Owen Hart in a cage match, and they were using the cage as a weapon. But here, they're Flair and Race are discouraged from using it. I enjoyed this match. More to what you said, Cody, is Harley Race would retire shortly after this match. And I think he had been wrestling for, I want to say it was like really consistently since the 70s, I think, at the end of his career, and, like you said, he would retire shortly after this, but it was, a passing of the torch. It was Harley Race used to be, the man, and then now it's going to be Ric Flair's turn. And it's really interesting growing up as a wrestling fan and always looking at Ric Flair as the old guy. Oh, Ric Flair is the old guy. He's the veteran. You would always hear about how great Flair and Steamboat was. Here you're seeing him as not really a rookie, but as like, okay, well, now Flair has earned his place as, as the world champion. So you're just now seeing like Ric Flair become Ric Flair. And I thought that was really cool. So and obviously what he would become and what Dusty Rhodes would become, it was, I really enjoyed seeing and to where all that would lead. I mean, I thought it was great. I like the passing of the torch. I like the headbutt. I like, the splash from Flair, or the crossbody from Flair, to win the match. I mean, and I thought it was great. I mean, I think it was, and one thing I want to mention is, before this match, you had mentioned that there was some interviews and stuff, and you had seen Dusty Rhodes, with a group of women, and Barbara Clary is asking, who do you think's going to win? Dusty Rhodes says, hey, I'm not going to tell you, but these women will tell you, and that was really cool. The entrance music that Ric Flair gets is great, and when Harley Race is making his way to the ring, you could just see how like miserable he looks. He looks, like he doesn't want to be there. He hates the fans. He gets in the ring, and immediately goes out to Flair. And I thought all that was great. Before this, whenever Charlie Brown he comes out and he kisses Tony Schiavone, in the interlude between this match and the previous one. And then he shouts out Jimmy Valiant, which I guess is himself. So that was cool. One thing I wanted to note is that it looked like Roddy Piper had clippers in, like those kind of fake teeth that you would get in the 80s, like the clippers. Thought that was cool. So just wanted to get that in. But yeah, I mean, and you never really see a snapmare in today's wrestling. And Rick match, and it was grinding at first, but it really picked up, and the tempo of this match picked up, and we got to see pile drivers. You got to see Race targeting Flair's back and neck. Yeah, I mean, all of it was great. And before I kick it over to Chris, I wanted to note that upon some research, Harley Race actually participated in a 1999 NBC special exposed pro wrestling's greatest secrets. His face, of course, was covered to conceal his identity, kayfabe, and discuss the inner workings of the business. And another thing I want to note about Harley Race was he did play himself as the distinguished ring announcer for a tag team match involving Mil Mascaras and El Julio del Santo in the 2007 film Mil Mascaras versus the Aztec Zombie, or Mummy. So the Aztec Mummy. So that was cool. But yeah, I mean, other than that, this match was great, and it's cool to see, Rick win one. And very recently, I think as of today, actually, I think he appeared on AEW. So, and just recently we seen Ric Flair in his last match, and that awful match that he had with I think it was Sanjay Dutt and Jeff Jarrett, and he had Andrade as his tag team partner. So to see, Starrcade 83, and then to see recent history, it's kind of a wild one.
For this match, for me, like going back and watching it, you got to see the like you guys would say, the I guess the beginning of what the Ric Flair we know today. Cody, you had mentioned that he was the only one that got the full-on actual entrance that we know and love today. And one thing that I loved about this match, that you had three people in that ring that were, Harley Race being the current, Ric Flair being the challenger, and Gene being the, former champion himself. You got to see three champions in that ring, or former champions in that ring. And they, like you guys said, the technicality, and then the brutal use of the cage that would implement each wrestler both donning the crimson mask. It was just kind of amazing to see that this match just play out. Like, both of them told a story in a way that you don't really see much anymore. Like, this match had such a build-up. Throughout the whole event, you got to see the build-up go, like, from the start to finish. It was there the whole time. They were very much pushing this match. They were very much pushing Flair. I mean, they called it Flair for the gold, in kind of lieu that they were pushing Ric Flair to win this title. And it shows, and it pays off well in this match. One thing that I always loved is that, you see Ric Flair, he's got that platinum blonde hair, and anytime he gets bloodied up, or anytime he gets any kind of sort of blood on him, that hair almost turns like a bright cherry red. And it's just always kind of funny. Like, even here, he's younger, and I think he's always, anytime I've ever seen Flair, he's had that patented platinum blonde hair, and it's, here he's going for his third chance, and he's, he ends up, he gets it and he wins it. And one thing I noted when, Cody, you mentioned when Harley Race went up to the second rope to do that headbutt, you could tell that the both of them legit collided heads, So, I mean, he was not trying to do that, but it most definitely, you saw that, and he almost he kind of dazed himself, kind of like put himself off. He was like, oh, whoa, okay. And you see him laying there for a second. But another thing I noticed, that anytime Harley would put Ric Flair into the cage, he'd do it into the area that was just the chain link. Whereas when Ric Flair would use the cage, he would literally hit Harley Race's head on a post, therefore doing more damage. But it would seem that Ric Flair got most of the damage when it comes to using that ring, especially when Harley Race took that moment and almost grinded Ric Flair's face into the cage. It was just like such kind of, that's what really amped it up. Just probably the damage factor of Ric Flair. Who would you would later see in the promo afterwards. Just his whole face and body just covered in blood, and you never really realize just how much them guys bleed until you see matches like this, where they are literally covered almost head to toe in that stuff. So, but and Gene, he was very adamant. He was like, "I want you guys to wrestle. I don't want you guys to be using this ring. I mean, this cage. This cage was here just to keep you guys contained, not for you to use or whatever." That's kind of the idea that I got what he was doing. Every time they were trying to use the cage, he was always adamant and trying to pull them off or trying to take them away. It's like, hey, stop that. But then, he would point that finger and he would, get going. But it was, sorry, I kind of lost my breath there for a second. But anyways, this was definitely, I won't say the top match, because for me, like I said, the top match for me was the dog collar match. But this was definitely probably the second favorite of the night for me, given the factor of this is where you got to see really the start of the prestigious 16-time champ himself, Ric Flair. See the start of his what we know Ric Flair is to today. So, but other than that, that's really all I have. I did want to note that freaking just seeing the afterwards, you got to see like everybody come into the ring and kind of celebrate with him, and then you like I want to say it was Angelo who was carrying him, Ric Flair on his shoulders. I could be wrong there, and you guys are more than welcome to fact check me on that. But it was just him carrying him around the ring. It was kind of cool to see just the man just being paraded around the ring like the champion that he was. It kind of reminds me of when, Bret Hart, something we covered before, like when Bret Hart finally beat Yokozuna, and that's kind of how they paraded him around. So, like I said, just seeing it here in '83, and then going fast forwarded to when you see them do it with Bret in '93. So, yeah, yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, great. I think we're going to try to go ahead and wrap things up unless Cody's got something.
No, just want to add your comment about Ric Flair's last match. I guess you haven't heard. Ric Flair is trying to have one last match against Ricky Morton.
Oh, why wouldn't he?
I mean, that's a good question. Why wouldn't he? Why not?
Okay. Well, how much money can we pay to either guy to not do that? And I don't mean that disparaging. Obviously, Ricky Morton, fantastic. He and Bob Gibson, one of the best tag teams ever. Ric Flair, one of the best ever. But I don't know. I don't want to see that match, but maybe somebody does.
I think Flair does, and that's probably about it.
Yeah, I don't know. They should just have Charlotte fight Ricky Morton's son. Kerry Morton?
Please no. Please don't. I absolutely, with a wholehearted hate Charlotte Flair. I cannot stand her. She needs to get herself her own damn gimmick. She needs to quit running off her daddy's gimmick. That's all she's doing. She's using her daddy's fucking name and fucking trying to use his gimmick to make herself think. I mean, sure it's work, sure it's in her thing, but I'm just tired of it.
Well, okay. Very passionate speech from Chris there at the end. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's not for me. Maybe it's for somebody else, but yeah, I don't know. But all right, yeah. Well, so we'll go ahead and end things there. So thanks so much for sticking around for us. I know this one was a little bit of a doozy, but I feel like it was well worth it. Everyone needed to get their stuff in. But yeah, if you would like to hear more from us, feel free to stick around. I think that we might be a little bit late to the party, but we're going to go ahead and try to pump out Halloween Havoc 1993 in the next episode. And of course, that's got the Vader Cactus match. So it will come out after Halloween, but I don't know. Maybe you can enjoy that post-Halloween goodness. But yeah, so stick around for that. If you have a question or concern, please I am the page. I mean, other than that, that's it for us. Continue the page at That's 3Ref at Instagram and Facebook. Tell a friend, tell a family member, let them know what's going on. But as far as for me, on behalf of these two guys, thank you so much. You guys be safe, enjoy yourselves, and I don't know. Insert generic. See, that's the thing is we need an outro. We need to say something at the end of these podcasts. So whatever you're thinking in your mind, insert here. Bye-bye.